Thanks for listening to the Women Emerging podcast. Every week we put up a new episode with insights into leadership, practical leadership, seen through the eyes of women leaders of all ages and all sectors from right across the world. Our aim is for women to be able to say, if that's leadership, I'm in. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and join Women Emerging on our website, womenemerging.org. That's womenemerging.org for more fabulous free leadership content. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Julia Middleton, Director of Women Emerging and your podcast host, and also author of the Women Emerging book, which I am in the middle of writing at the moment, and it is terrifying. I both love this book and I totally hate it. It comes out on the 14th of September. Yes, well, it's good, I think. I don't know how good it is, but I know it's good. When we came back from our expedition, I started a series of episodes, which ended up being 7 episodes over 7 weeks with 7 really fabulous women talking about the sort of starting point of the book, which is that as if you're leading, you need to understand yourself pretty well first. You can't lead other people if you don't understand yourself. And that means understanding your essence, what makes you you, and how that essence plays out when you start to lead. So we did 7 episodes. They were on otherness, nature, the body, the sacred, ancestors, trauma, and education. All 7 have a huge impact on how we lead. We offered them up only as examples of pieces of our essence that have had an impact on how we lead. Other women will have a different combination and probably more on their list. But we started there with our essence. And then we did these 4 episodes on energy, which was a sort of fast forward to the end of the book, because that was the great discovery for us. Leading is really about creating energy. And we did 4 episodes on energy with 4 amazing women. But I thought I'd try and give you more of a sense, because between the beginning and the end there's quite a lot of content. I thought I'd give you a sense of it and the sense of the book. And I thought let's start by me sharing my audition with you. So last week I did an audition. The book comes out on the 14th of September, but then quite rapidly afterwards an audio comes out. And last week I had to go in for an expedition. I had to go in for an audition to figure out whether it was going to be me who read the book out to you or a narrator. Now, of course, a narrator won't stumble like I do and get the wrong word and giggle and laugh at some of the bits of the book. It might be much, much better done by a narrator. Anyhow, I thought I'd play you my audition, and my audition was effectively to read the introduction to the book. So have a listen. 1, should give you a better feel for the book, and two, you can tell me what you think, whether it should be me or a really professional narrator. For the last year, I've led an expedition of 24 women to explore leadership. We set out with what he thought was a simple aim: to find an approach to leadership that resonates with women. For months, we spoke to women across the world about leadership, and at the end, we gathered to compile everything that we'd learnt. We all undertook the expedition because we're tired of watching women struggle to make sense of status quo leadership, a status quo mostly defined by men and by women who think that to be successful, they have to lead like men. What we discovered was not what we'd anticipated. It was something far more exciting. We don't need an approach, because the quality of leadership and the act of leading are individual and personal. There are common elements, but they're not common to all, and they're not done in the same ways. What we really need is a map. With a good map, everyone can set their own compass and do their own expedition. And everyone can find an approach to leadership that works for them. This book is just that map. Wherever you are in the world, whatever age you are, whether your work is in marketplaces or temples, homes or offices, whether you play on sports fields or in orchestras, the book invites you to go on your own expedition and offers you a map to help you find what's right for you. We discovered something else that made us think again. The word leadership suggests something that is set in stone, rigid, overwhelming and pompous. And the word leader feels like a position to which you're appointed, a role that rapidly becomes a status or a right. But the act of leading is full of energy, ever-changing and personal. So from now on, we're going to talk about leading as much as we possibly can. Over the year, our expedition confirmed this too. We're not alone in our tiredness with status quo leadership. Across the world, it's turning women away from leading, at a time when the world needs women leading more and more. I hope you enjoy your expedition. I enjoyed mine. Love, Julia. So tell me what you think. Just to go back on some of those points from the introduction, we set out to find an approach to leadership that resonates with women, and we called it an approach. Yes, that was rapidly clear that wasn't for real. There were 24 women on the expedition from all over the world, and we spoke to hundreds of women, and it was so obvious that there was no single one an approach. There are many approaches. Women find their own way of leading, and that our objective was to help women find their way, not to give women an approach. The second one was this word leadership and leader. Leader, a title that becomes a right too quickly. Leadership, that to me, leadership finishes with that expression ship. Leadership. And it always makes me think of a tanker sort of wallowing in the middle of an ocean, where even a 1 degree change in direction is agonizingly slow and difficult. Leading is so much more exciting, so much more interesting, so much more intriguing, so much more a generator of energy. So it's got to be leading. We went through the traditional thing, like all of us do, saying, should we abandon the word completely? But no, what we decided was let's use the verb. Now, as we go through this episode of the podcast, you'll discover how difficult it is just to stick to the verb. I'll slip into leader and leadership because it's so commonly used, but our objective is to use the word leading as much as we possibly can. And the other thing is that as we went through the expedition, it was a whole year talking to so many women, and they would gently smile when they asked us why we were doing this, and we answered that we wanted a way of leading that made sense to us. We stopped quite rapidly talking too much about men, because it's not just men who've produced status quo leadership. Lots of women have produced status quo leadership as well. But one thing that's absolutely clear to women, pretty well all the women we spoke to, is that whatever status quo is, and inevitably it has been hugely defined by men, but whatever status quo is, it doesn't necessarily resonate for women. All in all, the map began to appear. The map sort of reframed this book not as a leadership book, but as a guidebook almost, providing a map so that you go on your expedition to find your approach to leading that works for you. Lots of women will read the book. Their expedition will simply be reading the book. Lots of you will read the book and do a bit more, because at the end of each chapter there are some suggestions on things that you might do. And then I think lots of you will actually choose to go through the book and use the map as a group, as you form what I hope is a very diverse group in many ways, particularly in age, and go through it together and learn from each other about how leading works for you. This map must help you set your own compass, so that what is a very long journey, because learning to lead is hard work and takes an awful long time, and I don't think there's ever an end to it. You'll need to have set your own compass just to keep you going. So what does the book cover? So if the beginning is the E of essence and the end is the E of energy, we talk, I think, a lot about how you translate your essence through what we call the elements of your leading to how you express your leading, and then on to how that turns into an energy, and an energy that spirals upwards, but is in the end, even as it spirals upwards, always rooted, anchored back in to your essence. We talk a lot about the things that we need to dump, the things we need to jettison when we're leading as women, the urge to be a good girl, the instinct to believe that there's only limited spaces at the table, jettison our views about age, jettison our views about looking after ourselves, jettison our temptation to use the word enough too much. So we talk a lot about that. We talk about using your essence to find your purpose and how important that is. And talk a lot about how to reframe some of the things that have been presented to us as our weaknesses, because they're really our strengths. You know, the imposter syndrome is so often presented as our weakness. You know, maybe it's our strength, because it saves us from the lack of humility, that it saves us from that conviction that we know everything, that is so important in leading. Maybe we need to reframe how we think about our emotions, how we think about instincts, reframe lots of things, not as our weaknesses, but indeed as our strengths as we lead, and particularly lead in our modern world, because it's not just leading that's changed, but the world around us has changed. So there is a real need to do leading in a different way, and probably a way that reframes some of what have been perceived as women's weaknesses as indeed their strengths, and the strengths for everybody. And then we went on to talk a bit about life is about combining things, and often about combining things that, to all intents and purposes, can't be combined. They are almost opposites. And that as you lead, you need to figure out how you combine both humility and visibility, both empathy and having distance, both the individual and the collective, both being quiet and being loud, both being vulnerable and being strong, both being agile and being dogged, being inclusive and setting boundaries, being thoughtful and being risky. That the power is in the combination of the two. The energy is in the combination of the two. So we talked a lot about that, and about all the way through my expedition, or the first expedition we did, I kept a journal, as everybody else did, because otherwise you sort of lose the ideas as you go, lose some of the threads, and don't spot how your tanker has moved, how you've moved yourself. So I kept a journal, and I've tried to pick up some of the best interviews that influenced me on the expedition and shared them with you, whether that's women who are amazing at leading performance, or leading a team, or leading creativity, or leading pace, or leading against the odds. So trying to capture how they do it, and probably in that recognize that all of them have different pieces of their essence. But it all built up to the finale, and the finale is that leading is about energy. Think about the energy in a room. Think about the absence of energy in a room. Think about what's possible when there is energy in the room. Think about when it's unhelpful energy. Think about when it's wonderfully inspiring energy. And think about when it begins to spiral and create something glorious. That's where we ended up, and that's where I think the book will take you and give you that conviction that leading is really about generating energy, and generating energy for ourselves, inside ourselves, generating energy for others, and generating energy for change. So sort of that's the book. She says nervously, I hope I haven't put you off. I so hope that I haven't put you off. Was it a good idea to produce this episode? Who knows? Have I done the book justice? Who knows? I do know, though, that I've learnt an awful lot about leading in the expedition, and I do know that I've learnt an enormous amount about leading from the podcast episodes, and in fact, painful though it is, I've learnt an awful lot about leading, pulling it all together and writing this book. So I hope that on the 14th of September you'll be tempted to buy it, or indeed to listen to the audio a few weeks later, at which point you will discover whether it's me or a narrator. See if I've passed my audition or not. And if you do want to pre-order, just send me an email at info@womenemerging.org. That's info@womenemerging.org, and I'll make sure that you get a pre-order of the book. More pre-orders we get, the more likely it is to be successful. So even if I haven't convinced you in my rambling explanation of it, I promise you that the map has been enormously helpful to me, and I believe deeply that it will be enormously helpful to you. So, talk next week. Lots of love, Julia.
To become part of our movement and share your thinking with us, subscribe to the podcast and join the Women Emerging group on our website at womenemerging.org. We love all of the messages you send us. Keep them coming.